land repair provisions, and I think that we have we got staff to present on this? Land repair program. Is anyone doing that one? I'm just. Yeah. Okay. Maybe we move too quickly because because we deferred one matter. So well, I'll move it. We've done that. Yeah. I'll move that. Does anyone want to second that? Tim Scandrett. Have we got someone to advise on the Operative City Plan land repair provisions? Is that you, Brigitte?
Yes, it is. Perhaps answer questions.
Yep.
The report is fairly self-explanatory.
Yeah, no, but it is a complex issue, and that's why. And our recommendation is that that we've been briefed on the review of the provisions, and I know that council has been briefed. So we've had an informal briefing, and we've also so we've had an informal briefing, and so it was. Yeah, but it's come straight to council without going through ERCA because we didn't have an earthquake recovery committee of the whole last week. That's correct. So, Yanni, I know that you were away, so I was quite mindful of that, because councillors have been briefed, but I know that you haven't. So,
was it at the briefing?
Oh, yeah.
And
okay.
I think you were too.
I had there were a number of questions that were asked around issues to do with quality reassurance that the work would be done. If it doesn't need a consent, what checks and balances exist to ensure that it's done to an appropriate level. And I just use the example of the houses that have been lowered into the flood zones, that are now getting flooded as a result of not needing a consent, which seems pretty unsatisfactory.
This particular report is about ensuring that the committee is reasonably accepting of the Category 8 rules that the briefing was about. You're talking about Category 9 land, Councillor?
The issue is that it's nice to have an ideology that says let's just speed up processes and remove the need for consents. And for the people that genuinely do the right thing, that's really good, and people really appreciate that. But for the people that don't do the right thing, for the contractors that cut corners, or for the insurers that don't want to pay, then they can use the loopholes to get around doing what they should actually be doing as a result. So, what I don't want to happen in terms of the city is that in the next 5 years, there's a whole bunch of repairs that are done that create a new leaky building syndrome 10, 20 years down the track because the quality is so poor and there was no consenting, and we now become liable because people say that wasn't fair. So,
perhaps I can answer that, Yanni.
That's really important.
The proposed rule includes a number of standards at parts B and C, and there's also a requirement for those works to be signed off by a geotech engineer. And that's I guess our checks and balances to ensure that work's done properly. I know you.
Who reviews the work that the geotech engineer does, and if people have complaints about that work or that statement, where do they go and how do they take it from there?
In terms of reviewing the certification, we wouldn't do that. We would collect that information and collect the certification, and after that would be a private matter.
So that would be done on the same basis that any other approving authority or regis engineer signs off something. We wouldn't necessarily be actively reviewing that. We would accept those producer statements, and they become the guarantee should something happen in the future.
So that engineer then becomes liable? So if there's a issue that the work hasn't been done in appropriately, the person has to take that person to court, and we're not liable as a council.
Well, we will always, I suppose, it's probably not my area of expertise, but we will always be joined probably, I suspect, if there was ever a civil case against something like that, because we are the local authority. But principally, where you do have some form of producer statement, the onus lies on the certifying engineer or specialist.
Paul?
I'd sort of have exactly where Yani's going. So I just wonder if there's a mechanism whereby properties that are in a flood-prone zone or a flood management zone, or land that is actually rated less than TC2, where, like Yani talked about with the lowering of foundations, that before they get signed off, or before they actually go to work, that there is some work done around properties that, rather than lowering the building to the lowest point of where the foundations are sunk, that they are actually raised rather than actually lowered. So I'm just wondering if there's a mechanism to trigger that, so we actually are made aware that this is a potential risk.
That's a question I don't think that's going to be answered or addressed by these particular rule changes. I mean, what you're talking about is really, it's an interface between the whole threshold between repair and rebuilding of foundations, and then you've got the overlay of existing use rights, which are enshrined in Section 10 of the Act. So therefore, those two mechanisms, more than anything to do with these rules, are going to drive the behaviour about how high new buildings or rebuilds or repairs are taken to. And that, again, this rule can't amend that. And I think in the report we point to the fact that, if that's something that we want to look at, that's something that we would need to investigate. But we can't, through this process or this mechanism, resolve that particular problem.
I think that both councillors are raising a concern that's identified in the paper, that our processes can't be used to determine whether it's a rebuild or repair.
That's right, yeah.
And a lot of people are looking at the council to sort of say, help, we need somebody on our side, because we can't actually resolve the issue with our insurer or with EQC.
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons why we've joined the court case for the declaratory judgment in relation to whether the damage to the floor levels and the exposure to increased risk of inundation or increased vulnerability to flooding, as they describe it, is also something that ought to be addressed by way of the floor levels.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. Phil?
Can I just ask how, for example, that with the new district plan, how the flood management areas might operate in the event, say, of council receiving new information, so that, for example, council believe that, in fact, like areas like what is on the map now as flood awareness areas or flood management areas, if in fact they were to change in the future, would that mean that, in fact, the regulations would apply to a wider area?
Yeah, that's correct. The current flood management areas are different from what is proposed. So yeah, you're right.
So we would need to go through a plan change to further amend the rules to reflect that new information. Yeah. Yeah, so they are dynamic, but they're not automatically adjusting themselves.
There's also perhaps an irony in the fact that in 2.6, when you highlight the exemption from city plan requirements under Section 10 of the RMA, that some insurance companies are actually using that to insist upon people building like for like, so that people are required, so that they can fall back on existing use rights and therefore not contribute to the cost of lifting even to the very minimum. It's unfortunate.
Well, yes, and unfortunately, I mean, we're never going to be able to perhaps design a regulatory regime which dictates the behaviour of different insurance companies, because clearly there's a different practice throughout the industry in Christchurch.
Yeah, but I just wonder whether this is something that we should perhaps feed back to central government, given that they're addressing this issue, and to say that it would be incredibly helpful if they would assist, to join with us essentially around addressing the floor levels issue within the flood management areas.
Yep.
Yeah. Yanni?
So I just wanted to check, because the other issue we've got is contaminated land. My understanding is when the soil that goes back, like so if you take land repair, there's no checking of the quality or the contamination of or lack of contamination of the soil that's going back into the land. So in terms of land repair, what is the safeguard around the types of soils and materials that will be used to fix the land? Is there any safeguard?
Yeah, there is the New Zealand standard that's referenced in the rule. Again, requires certification that includes a section about soil and quality of clean fill.
And what does that say? Like, what is that?
The engineer just has to say that it is clean fill from and sign that off. I don't remember the exact wording of it.
It doesn't need to be tested, bought from a certain place.
No, it's not that specific. It's really just one line and a block box to sign on.
And if people had to get a consent, what safeguard would exist, if any, in terms of checking on that?
In terms of checking on what's in the fill,
Yep.
it's really the engineer signing that off is our safeguard on that.
And the hail sites are excluded from this.
Yeah.
Are they?
No,
Yes.
the National Environmental Standard includes the rules that relate to contaminated land. So if it's listed as on a hail list or found to be contaminated, then consent would be required through the NES.
Yeah, but you can't rely on this if you are on the hail. Hey?
No, yes, you would still need consent. That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's the way I read it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All hail sites need consent if they trigger that consent, isn't it, through
Yeah.
the amount of soil
Yeah.
that's removed in
That's
the
correct,
change?
correct,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, okay.
Yeah. All right, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. It's carried. Thank you. The next item